I moved in on a grey day with light rain, the kind you barely notice until 5 minutes later and your shoulders are soaked. It was late afternoon, around 5. The daylight was fading early, like someone had pulled the curtains halfway closed. The building was old but well maintained. Ceramic tile in the entryway, paint on the walls that had faded a little, and stone steps that felt worn smooth from years of use. All the doors looked the same. Metal doors, identical peepholes, identical number plates. My apartment was on the 3rd floor. The rent was reasonable, the landlord wasn't pushy, and the lease was easy. At that point, all I wanted was a safe place I could come home to after work and shut the door when I was tired. The first night I slept between moving boxes. My bed hadn't arrived yet. I spread a blanket on the floor and lay down. Because the apartment was empty, every sound felt bigger. The radiator pipes clicking now and then, the hiss of a car sliding over wet asphalt outside, an occasional distant horn. And there's a smell to a place you've just moved into. A mixed smell. Cardboard, cleaning supplies, and that neutral wall scent older apartments have. That first week my head was full. Work during the day, settling in at night. Cook something, open boxes, take the trash down, shower. The days blurred together. The strange little things started during that time, but calling them strange almost feels like too much. They were more like tiny doubts, and the most dangerous part is how easily you talk yourself out of tiny doubts. The first thing I noticed was my toothbrush. I always keep it on the right side of the sink. One morning it was on the left. I told myself, I must have put it there. Then I saw that the drawer under the small table in my living room was half open. I didn't even use that drawer. I thought, maybe I bumped it. And then I actually laughed at myself. Wind doesn't open a drawer. Within a week, 3 or 4 more little things like that happened. One time there was a faint, sweet shampoo smell in the bathroom. I use unscented products. I don't like lingering smells. But it was there anyway, like someone had showered and the steam had just cleared and the scent hung around for a few minutes. Then I noticed something about the door. One evening I came home from work, turned my key, and the lock didn't feel normal. It wasn't stuck and it wasn't hard to turn. It just felt different, like you were turning a lock for the 3rd time when it had already been turned twice. It's hard to describe. You get used to a mechanism. Your hand expects a certain resistance. That day it felt like my hand came up empty. The door opened. I stepped inside. Everything looked normal. But the second I walked in, my eyes went to the deadbolt and I had this thought. Did I lock the deadbolt before I left? I'm used to using just the main lock. I only use the deadbolt at night sometimes. That morning I'd been in a rush. I couldn't remember turning the deadbolt when I left, and the difference between I don't remember and I didn't is enough to make you feel crazy. Still, I convinced myself. It was probably just muscle memory. That night was the first time the word maybe really settled into the back of my mind. A few days later, a little after 2 in the morning, I woke up. It wasn't a clear, loud noise that woke me. It was more like the feeling that something had happened inside the apartment. You know how you can sometimes sense someone in a room even if they aren't speaking? It felt like that. I didn't move. I tried to steady my breathing. My ears felt like they doubled in size. For a while I heard nothing. Then I heard a very light dragging sound from the hallway, like a slipper sliding slowly over a floor with no carpet. Then a very short click. One voice in my head, weirdly calm, said, "Someone is right outside your door." Another voice jumped in immediately. "Don't be stupid. Old building, pipes, a neighbour." But that dragging sound, it didn't feel mechanical. It sounded human, like a person trying not to make noise. I wanted to go to the peephole, but even getting out of bed felt like it would be too loud. What if someone really was there and they heard me stand up? For a second, I pictured something stupid and terrifying. Someone standing by my door with a key, listening to me breathe. The thought made my throat go dry. I got up anyway, but painfully, slowly. I was even scared the floorboards would creak when I put my feet down. I went to the door and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. The lights were off, just dim emergency lighting and long shadows. I went back to bed. Sleep didn't come. After a while, I started getting annoyed at myself. New apartment, new sounds, new routine. That's all this is, I told myself. The next day I started watching myself more carefully. I checked the door twice before leaving. I turned around and looked again. After I stepped out, I even came back and grabbed the handle to make sure it wasn't loose or half-latched. Even doing that made me think, what am I doing? For a few days, nothing happened. And that's the thing. It relaxes you. It makes it feel like all your doubts just faded on their own. Then, on a rainy Saturday afternoon, I ran into that neighbour in the lobby again. It was the first time I really got a good look at him. He was in his 40s, dressed normally, clean, not overly expressive, the type who doesn't get too close when he talks. As I was heading toward the stairs, he called out behind me, "Hey, I think you dropped something." I turned. He was holding a key. Just one key. Plain. "Me?" I said and checked my pocket. My key was still there. "I don't know," he said. "I found it by the door. You just moved in. Maybe it got mixed up." Something about the way he was holding it bothered me. Even if a key is ordinary, when someone's holding a key that isn't theirs, it just looks wrong. The way it sits in their fingers feels wrong. "My key's right here," I said and showed him. He didn't react like he'd made a mistake. He just held the key out a little closer, like nothing was weird at all. "Look," he said, "it's similar. Sometimes the manager keeps spares. For emergencies. Maybe it's for your apartment." I froze. The question hit me like a slap. Why would the manager give my spare key to a neighbour? "Who's the manager?" I asked. "The guy downstairs," he said. "Like a caretaker. Everything goes through him." I didn't take the key. "I'll ask," I said. I tried to keep my voice normal, but I could feel that alarm inside me flaring up again. He said, "Okay," shrugged, slipped the key back into his pocket, and went upstairs. I stood there for a second, listening to his footsteps in the stairwell. They were normal, not rushed, not slow. That made it worse, because he wasn't acting weird. And a person you suspect acting completely normal is somehow more unsettling than someone acting obviously off. On Monday morning, I went down to the caretaker's room. It was a small room with a desk, a chair, and a cabinet. The caretaker was in his 50s. His face looked tired, but his voice was calm. I told him what had happened. At first he looked at me like, "That can't be right." Then he opened a drawer and pulled out an old notebook. "Spare key records," he said. He flipped through the pages. Even the soft rustle of paper sounded too loud to me. Like that notebook was getting heavier in my hands, even though I wasn't touching it. He found my apartment number. On the line next to it, it said a spare key had been issued. There was a date, and there was a signature. "Is this your signature?" he asked. No, it wasn't. Not even close. The shape of it wasn't mine. My last name looked slightly wrong too, like whoever wrote it didn't know how I actually sign. My stomach turned ice cold. A strange chill spread through my body. My mouth went dry. "I never took a spare key," I said. "I never signed that." He stared at the entry again. "That's impossible," he said at first. Then he stopped. For a brief moment his face got serious. "I'll talk to the landlord," he said. But the way he said it didn't make me feel like he was going to investigate. It felt more like he wanted to smooth it over and move on. All day at work, I kept thinking about the door. I kept checking my phone. Part of me kept saying, maybe it's just a mistake in the book. Another part of me kept repeating the same sentence over and over. Someone can open my door. That sentence is simple, but it's terrifying, because a door is a boundary. On the other side is the world. On this side is me. If that boundary is broken, everything feels broken. When I got home that night, I stood in the hallway for a moment before unlocking the door and listened. The air had that building smell, faint dampness, wet shoes and cleaning detergent. No sounds. Still my heart was pounding as I went in. Everything looked normal. That night I decided to do something. Not a full security system. Just a small thing to buy myself a little comfort. I put a small rubber doorstop under the door from the inside, something that would scrape and resist if the door was forced. I locked the deadbolt. I plugged my phone in. I got into bed. But I didn't sleep. I pretended to sleep. My eyes were closed, but my mind was wide awake, my ears tuned to the smallest sound. When you do that, you start hearing your own heartbeat like it's coming from somewhere else. Even swallowing feels too loud. I didn't know what time it was. I was somewhere between light sleep and being awake when I heard it. Metal. A clear metal sound. A key sliding into the lock. This time I didn't think, did something happen? This time I thought, it's happening. My heart sped up instantly. My chest felt tight. My breath rose up like something inside me was pulling me to the surface. I didn't move. If I moved, the bed might creak. Something very primitive took over in my brain. Stay still. Don't be seen. The lock turned, slow and controlled. No panic, no rushing, like someone opening their own door. The handle went down. The door didn't open. I felt the person outside pause, like they were listening too. Without meaning to, I stopped breathing as much. Then the handle went down again, harder. The door shifted slightly, but it still didn't open. I grabbed my phone. The screen felt bright enough to light up my face, so I covered it with my hand. My fingers were shaking. I called emergency services. When they answered, my voice came out in a whisper. Someone is trying to open my door with a key. They're outside right now. The operator asked for my address. I gave it quietly. Even while I was speaking, I had this ridiculous fear that the sound of my voice would travel through the door and into the hallway. I know it sounds stupid, but in that moment, your brain is not doing logic. The handle went down again. This time the door was pushed slightly. The metal made a small sound against the frame. The doorstop scraped with a thin, ugly squeal. That sound felt like a scream to me, and then I heard a voice, very low, like someone talking to themselves. This is stupid. The moment I heard that, every "maybe it's the wrong door" excuse died. Someone at the wrong door says, "sorry," and leaves. They don't say that. They don't keep trying. They don't sound frustrated like a plan isn't working. I put a small rubber doorstop under the door from the inside, something that would scrape and resist if the door was forced. I locked the deadbolt. I plugged my phone in. I got into bed. But I didn't sleep. I pretended to sleep. My eyes were closed, but my mind was wide awake, my ears tuned to the smallest sound. When you do that, you start hearing your own heartbeat like it's coming from somewhere else. Even swallowing feels too loud. I didn't know what time it was. I was somewhere between light sleep and being awake when I heard it. Metal. A clear metal sound. A key sliding into the lock. This time, I didn't think, did something happen? This time, I thought, it's happening. My heart sped up instantly. My chest felt tight. My breath rose up like something inside me was pulling me to the surface. I didn't move. If I moved, the bed might creak. Something very primitive took over in my brain. Stay still. Don't be seen. The lock turned, slow and controlled. No panic, no rushing, like someone opening their own door. The handle went down. The door didn't open. I felt the person outside pause, like they were listening too. Without meaning to, I stopped breathing as much. Then the handle went down again, harder. The door shifted slightly, but it still didn't open. I grabbed my phone. The screen felt bright enough to light up my face, so I covered it with my hand. My fingers were shaking. I called emergency services. When they answered, my voice came out in a whisper. Someone is trying to open my door with a key. They're outside right now. The operator asked for my address. I gave it quietly. Even while I was speaking, I had this ridiculous fear that the sound of my voice would travel through the door and into the hallway. I know it sounds stupid, but in that moment, your brain is not doing logic. The handle went down again. This time, the door was pushed slightly. The metal made a small sound against the frame. The doorstop scraped with a thin, ugly squeal. That sound felt like a scream to me. And then I heard a voice, very low, like someone talking to themselves. This is stupid. The moment I heard that, every maybe it's the wrong door excuse died. Someone at the wrong door says, sorry, and leaves. They don't say that. They don't keep trying. They don't sound frustrated like a plan isn't working. There was a camera in the lobby, but it wasn't great. Still, when they checked the footage, something came up. The person who came to my door was my upstairs neighbour. He stood there, took out a key, tried it, waited, tried again. And after the doorstop made that scraping sound, he turned his head for a second and then went back up the stairs quickly. In that moment, something inside me shut off. When you're unsure, your brain protects you by saying, maybe I'm misunderstanding this. But when you see it on video, that door closes. He came to my door with a key. He tried to open it. He waited. He left. The next day I gave a statement. The caretaker's book got pulled out again. The fake signature became a bigger issue. I talked to the landlord. He insisted he hadn't given keys to anyone. But at that point, I wasn't focused on what people were saying. For me, the only fact that mattered was this. Someone had access to my key, and they tried to use it. I didn't stay in that apartment much longer. Even while packing, every time I sealed a box, I found myself looking at the door, like it might open at any second. When I moved into my next place, the first thing I did was change the lock. Even now, sometimes I wake up at night and my hand goes to my phone automatically. Sometimes the smallest sound outside a door takes me right back to that metal sound in the lock. The worst part is that he wasn't caught that night. He was stopped, sure, but not caught. And I don't know what happened before that night. The sweet shampoo smell, the toothbrush in the wrong place, the drawer left open. Looking back, those things don't feel like nothing anymore. That's why I'm writing this. Sometimes you silence yourself by saying, I'm overthinking. I did that. I packed everything into coincidence until I heard the sound of a key in my lock. Now if small things keep piling up, I don't tell myself maybe anymore. Because some maybes steal your sleep, and some of them pull your door handle down.